Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Welcome, everyone, back to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today, our guest is all the way over in the UK. Her name is Zoe Thompson. Zoe is a lifestyle and well-being coach, working with clients both online and in person to help them make profound and lasting change, unlocking minds so they can create the tomorrow they want while living to love their today. That's very beautiful. Zoe started her career in the police service, working in both operational and senior leadership roles. She has 10 years of coaching and mentoring experience and is a practitioner in NLP. She's a master practitioner in that, and that's neuro-linguistics. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. She's an ACE coach, ACE certified coach. That's Accelerated Coach Excellence. And she also is the World Business and Executive Coaching certified. I might have butchered that a little bit. She'll clean up whatever I mess up.
Yeah, okay.
And there's a little bit more to her bio. Zoe combines her personal and professional experiences, including achievements as a GB competitive strong woman athlete. We need to know what GB is, alongside her professional training to help her clients live the life they want with confidence. What's GB?
Great Britain.
Oh, Great Britain. Durr. Yeah.
We've got so many names. We've got England, we've got the UK, we've got GB. It gets very confusing.
Yes. Well, thank you, Zoe, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Is there anything about your bio that you want to clean up after me, bumbling through it?
No, there's lots of acronyms and abbreviations in there, isn't there? Essentially, I'm an NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming trained coach, but I'm also trained in the more sort of traditional coaching tools and executive coaching as well, as I work with companies. But yeah, you summed it up well.
Yeah. Well, we're very happy that you're here. And so one of the questions we tend to ask, because our audience is mostly made up of women, career women, who are trauma survivors. Mm-hmm. Typically childhood abuse, but it could be other things, sexual assault, domestic violence. Is there anything in your personal background that you feel comfortable? So anything you don't feel comfortable, it's okay. But anything about your background that you're comfortable with sharing in order to help connect with my audience?
Yeah, I was married for 6.5 years. I have a son from that marriage, and that marriage was abusive, coercive, controlling, and violent too. So I guess that would resonate with your audience. I think for me, what made it, I mean, these things are complicated for everybody. The complication for me personally was that I worked for the police at the time, so there was sort of the additional layers of pride covering that, sort of living two very different lives, my life at home and then my life when I went into work. So it was very strangely now, having been more open about it and talking about it a lot more, I think I've sort of recognized that actually, had I have spoken to people, then I might have been more supported than I felt. I think there's that judgment that kind of comes into it of, you should know better, you should be better, you shouldn't be in that position because you're in an employment where you support victims. Now, I was going into work and supporting victims and going home and living in that environment. So kind of extra layers, but it's complicated for everybody. It's not easy for anybody. It's not simple for anybody. It's just, for me at that time, it felt like those were the additional layers for me that made it pretty complicated.
Yeah, I so much appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that. Nothing, none of our stories are easy, like you said. And what's really good, I did not have to compare ourselves to others. But I used to do a lot of couples counseling. And then when my marriage was struggling and I had gotten divorced, I had that same kind of thought process, like, how am I going to do this work with couples if I can't even do my own relationship?
Yeah.
Right. And, regardless, we can't control what our partners say or do. So that's part of why women in careers often feel pretty trapped, or, it's hard to be open.
And it's something that I've learned and taken away from that, is that I'm very open now with the people that I work with, that I am still a work in progress. Now, I'm not perfect. I am by no means the finished article. And so I'll certainly be very honest with people to say, this is what I'm working on at the moment. And this is how I'm trying to work through this. And I think that's really important. I think it's important that for that rapport and that trust and that connection, is that nobody's that perfect finished article. We're all on a journey, aren't we? We're all a work in progress. And I think that is really important. And I think the difference for me with coaching is that it's not about me necessarily or my story, but certainly working with groups of women, groups of people, sometimes it can be really helpful to share a little bit of yourself to help people understand that that me too, or that this isn't just them that's going through this. And I think sometimes it's helpful for people to see somebody who's a little bit further on in their own journey to help give them some hope that it can all end up in a good place.
Yeah, I've read and heard a couple of times that in coaching, we just need to be 1 or 2 steps forward of where our client is at, not 10, not 20. We just have to be a little bit further along our healing path so we can help them along as well. Yeah. So I like that. It shows like we are all a work in progress. How do you think your experiences helped you with what you're doing now for work? How did it lead you there?
I think from that, there's lots of personal experiences that I think have contributed to where I am now. I think this particular experience, I think what it's helped me to understand is that nothing when you're on the outside looking in, it always looks much more simplistic, much more logical. When you're on the inside in it, it's much more emotional, way less logical, and definitely not simplistic at all. So I think there's that element for me now when I'm working with people, is understanding that I can, as a coach, I can take that step back. I can look at the big picture. I can help to see the big picture, and I can see things from different perspectives that can help the individual who's in their own situation to take that step back and in that safe space explore and see things from different perspectives. But there's that understanding that how it feels for that individual is not necessarily how I see it or how others may see it, but helping them to see things differently. It's just about that. I like for coaching, I like the term that sort of a joint thinking partner, but for me, it's just about helping people to feel safe to explore different perspectives, different options, different alternatives, and then give them that space to make a decision that feels best for them at that time, and without that judgment, without that expectation that they have to make a decision or they have to take action. This is just about exploring it, looking at it, and then when they are ready, they can then choose what that first step or next step is for them.
You're saying something very important. It's important for survivors to feel like they have options and choices.
Yeah,
because there were parts in their life or times in their life where that wasn't the case.
Yes.
So it's really wonderful.
I think that's really important for me. I think that's my understanding, having been in that situation where you're in a controlling, coercive environment. When you work for an organization that is there to support people, what you don't want to do in that organization is to control or coerce the victim into doing something they are not yet ready to do. And I think that is part of the problem, is that, so in the UK, we have zero tolerance policies around domestic abuse, domestic violence. So sometimes the police or other agencies can make the decision to arrest or prosecute the offender or the alleged offender without the victim pursuing that. And there's elements of doing the best thing for the victim is getting the victim out of that situation, but we know that that's not always the safest thing for the victim is to bring them out of that situation. So from my point of view, certainly the conversations I've had since then is that the victim, and I don't like that word victim, but I'm using that because that's the generic term that people will understand, is that they have to feel empowered to make the decision that's best for them, whether the other agencies or family or friends feel that that's the best decision for them. It's about the individual who's in that situation being empowered to make that decision. Otherwise, it's just another element of control or coercion. We have to feel empowered to take that step ourselves, for that step to be a good next step for us and for us to continue on that journey. If we feel like we're being controlled or coerced, it's just another element. So it doesn't work, and we retreat back to what we know, what's familiar, even if it's not what we want.
Yeah, exactly. The way I talk to my clients about the labeling is, at the time you were a victim of a crime. Mm-hmm. Now that it's past, you're a survivor. Mm-hmm. And then a new term that's come is thriver. So thriver is someone who's actively working on healing and their wellness journey. So tell us about your healing after your domestic violence. Like, how did you get to be looking and feeling better after all that happened? What was your plan?
Oh, I'm not sure there was a plan, to be honest. I think there was an opportunity for me to move out in what felt, if it is, and I know people will understand when I say this, that there was an opportunity and that was my time. It was like, okay, it's now, or you don't know when that next opportunity is going to come about. So when I moved out, it was then just a case of just keeping that momentum going, keeping moving forward. As you know, as statistically, it's proven when you come out of these relationships, the risk is a lot higher, and it was almost more tough coming out and staying out than it was in, because you know how to manage it when you're in. When you come out, it's new. Mm-hmm. It's like the complete unknown. Thankfully, I'm incredibly stubborn, which is not always a positive, but in this situation, it certainly became a very positive attribute for me, because I was like, that's it, decision done. I am not going back in. I just need to keep going. So getting that momentum going. And what I found was that the energy that I had been using to survive in that environment, as things got easier, that energy just, I was like, right, what am I going to do with this? And what can I do next? And that went into the recovery. And then as the recovery went on, that went into the thriving. Now it's that upward kind of trajectory, isn't it, of survival into kind of coming through it into recovery. And then for me, it's like, okay, what can I do next? And what I talk about with a lot of people is that the things that really help me to survive in that environment are definitely the things that help me thrive in the environment that I'm in now, and to be in the situation I'm in now has all been sort of very similar. So I started with my physical health, because that seemed to be the easiest thing to work on. But actually, and that's how I found Strong Woman, was that for me, just going in and having that routine, having that place where I could really focus on something different, something that felt very positive, that led me into Strong Woman. And so then that was a very positive distraction for me. The emotional, mental healing took a little bit longer, certainly took a few years. But there were other things there were other things going on that kind of helped contribute to that.
Very good. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the physical health, because in recovery, people think it's just emotional health, but it's physical health, it's spiritual health, it's mental health, and it's oftentimes relationship as well, because we do our best healing in communities and with other people. Would you say that's true for you as well?
Yeah, I went through it alone by choice. I think that's more about my own character rather than that. I think had I wanted to explore that, there were places and people that I could have had that support to go through. I think it's probably more typical of me and how I choose to deal with things. But I kind of felt like it was something I wanted to work on for me and do for me. I think that's part of that empowerment of taking that control back, which I know it's the complete other end of the spectrum, but it was almost like I hadn't felt in control. I hadn't felt like I'd been responsible for making decisions, or I'd been very much influenced by decisions that were made and actions and how I was living. It almost felt like actually walking that path on my own was that empowerment of, no, I'm taking it all of it back and I'm going to make those decisions. I'm going to choose what to do next. I think it's that freedom. Yeah, interesting. Since before you asked that question, I hadn't looked at it quite like that before. But I think that was a big part of it, of actually I needed to do it for me and being able to take that back. And as time's gone on, and I think that's part of the healing, is being able to choose to let people back in and be part of that again. And I think that's another sign of recovery and healing, isn't it? When the walls the barriers come back down a little bit and letting people back in.
No, I think that was all really interesting. And I get it. Your community, though, may just have looked differently, because I don't know if you did Strong Women alone. Were there other people involved in that? That might have been a community for you. You just didn't maybe talk to them about what was going on.
Yeah, the Strong Women's an incredibly supportive community. And, people that I trained with, it introduced me to a new group of people. And I think the difference for me was that it was introducing me to people who I hadn't known before. So I could step in and say, this is me, as in this is me who I am now, not this is who I've been, or this is who I was before. So I think, it's interesting, isn't it, of that being able to just walk in, do something different, but also go in and introduce yourself as somebody as you are and who you want to be, like the present to future, rather than who or what has gone on before.
Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit. I'm curious what your thoughts are on how NLP, the neuralistic program, how do you see that as a program that could benefit or help in the healing process? How would you describe that?
And the NLP course that I did, I came out of the police through redundancy 5 years ago, and I wanted to do a different type of coaching. I wanted to pick something that was completely different to that sort of very formal, very structured, very corporate environment. And NLP looked like a really good option for that. And I also picked a trainer who does things very differently. So very deliberately picked somebody who was very different, a different style, different approach to things. And I went in on day one thinking, this is part of my professional development. I introduced myself as a coach. I said, I'm here to learn more tools to help my clients. And what I thought I was signing up for and what I then got at the end of it were two completely different things, because I went on very much a personal journey. It was such an emotional roller coaster, and not just for myself, but just being in a room with other people who were learning and healing and working through things all at the same time. So what I found with NLP was looking at different tools, looking at different techniques, were how many of those things I had been using as a coping tool or as a recovery tool and hadn't known that it was a thing. I was looking at these and I was like, that's what I did. That's, reframing, of being able to go back and look at things and try and see things differently, and changing the conversation in my head. And it's so many of the things that we worked on and that we learned, I had kind of touched on and done elements of, but what it meant was I was able to really take it and use it for myself, and then eventually be able to use it for other people. But I think it's a really powerful tool. And I've done training in CBT as well, so cognitive behavioral therapy, positive psychology, and there's so many fantastic tools out there. And I think people know of them, or they might know the elements, but being able to put them all together and use different tools for different conversations, different individuals is really, it's just a really powerful thing to be able to do. But I certainly did not expect to go on such a personal journey with it. I don't think I've ever cried on a train, I definitely haven't ever cried on a training course before, but I think I pretty much went through this release of emotion over each and every training day. I was thinking, there can't possibly be that much emotion left in me. But I think what had happened was when I had come out of that relationship, I went straight into that sort of survival, almost warrior mode, single parent, working full time. It's like, right, this just needs to be done. I need to kind of get into that day. And because I hadn't shared that, there wasn't anybody saying, how are you? Are you okay? How do you feel? I mean, it's not a very British thing anyway, to be fair. It's not the kind of questions British people are comfortable in asking, especially when they know somebody's very emotional. It's almost like, there, stop crying. It's okay. Please stop now. This is uncomfortable for me. So I hadn't expressed that, I hadn't talked that through. So I think there was just this emotional bag, lots and lots of emotions that were in there that they just kept coming out. And I felt like 10 stone lighter by the end of it. Just felt I wasn't carrying this heaviness around with me.
Yeah, the bags, yeah.
Yes. And it was just I was exhausted. I've never felt that level of tiredness before, but I just felt so light with it as well. And I think, I hear people say now, like, oh, I just feel lighter. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I remember. It's such a great feeling.
Yeah. Release is such a powerful concept and very hard to do at times.
Yes. Yeah. So it's so much easier sometimes, isn't it, to hold on to it, even though we know that it's not healthy or helpful for us to hold on to it. Letting go of something that's familiar is tough. And, for a lot of us, these things that we experience, they become part of our identity, don't they? They become so deeply rooted into who we've become that actually trusting to let go of that and know that we can still be who we are without carrying that experience with us, that we can take the learning and leave the experiences behind, and we don't have to carry everything around. So yeah, it's incredible.
I liked how you said that. Keep the learning, ditch the rest, basically.
Yeah.
That's a great perspective. Okay. So another question I usually like to ask people, because I'm a big bibliotherapist, like I love books and with the healing journey. And if you don't like books, that's okay. But if you happen to, are there a couple of books that you felt were really helpful in your healing journey or in the work that you do now that other people could look at?
I do love books. I love learning, books for learning, and audiobooks are great for learning. I find it much easier to digest the learning through audiobooks, but I also love nothing more than to tuck up in the chair with a good fiction and kind of switch off from the reality of the world. The books that I tend to recommend the most are The Chimp Paradox by Dr. Steve Peters, which I think really helps us to understand how our brains work. And whilst we're very emotional beings, I think the Chimp Paradox is a really helpful way to explain to people why we do what we do. That monkey mind and, the computer brain. So for when we put our experiences go into that computer that then inform how we respond to things, when we think about repeated patterns of behavior, that's so hard to disrupt and challenge and change. Just understanding why that happens can just really, I find, is really helpful. And it's a book that I recommend to both young people and adults. And I think certainly one that I would recommend. The other one is a book called Sumo by a guy called Paul McGee, British guy. So it's Sumo, Shut Up and Move On. It's a really distinctive book in that there's a sumo wrestler on a bicycle. And what I really like about his book is that it's, again, talking about how our brains work, how we work as humans, but in very descriptive terms. So he talks about, having hippo time, which is where we need to sit in the pity pool and feel sorry for ourselves. But it's not a place where we want to stay, but it is a place where we reflect and we learn and we understand what's important. Why do I feel so emotional? Because what is it telling me that's important to me? But we can't stay in there. So we have to have our hippo time, but we have to come out of it.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's just really descriptive. And I think certainly for the people who are visual people, it's a really great way to go, there's the monkey mind, but then there's also, he talks about, wearing the victim t-shirt of actually something has happened to you, but that's not who you become. It's an experience, and so being able to move on from that. And I think it's a really great book in just some really useful day-to-day things that you can put into place that just help you to respond to things in a more positive way. And then if I was allowed a third one, the Carol Dweck fixed and growth mindset, I think is really powerful.
Fixed and growth mindset, Dr. Carol Dweck. So it's quite an older book. It's used quite a lot in sport and schools, certainly here in the UK. But it's another great one. I mean, in terms of sort of more recovery type books, they're not. I didn't really come into this coaching journey until 10 years after my own experiences. So I guess the type of books that I read now are probably more in line from a coaching perspective rather than a recovery perspective, because to me they're the same.
Yeah. And if we're being totally honest, I don't think I was in any headspace to be picking up books. It was more like I said, I just went straight into that action recovery mode, and I think the learning came a lot.
Everybody
later.
heals differently, and that's why I like the different stories that people bring on the show. I think a lot of your healing was probably physical, because that's what you felt called to do at that time, is to work out and get fit.
I'm also a very action orientated person, so I act first and think later, which is probably why I end up in some of the situations I end up in. I could probably do with thinking a little bit more and then acting, but it's just not what I do.
If it's working for you, I think we're doing good.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I got the names of the books right, because 2 of them I hadn't heard of before. So the first one, did you say Chimp Paradox?
Chimp as in chimpanzee. So Dr. Steve Peters, The Chimp Paradox.
Yep. Okay, got that one. And the next one's called Sumo.
Yeah, Sumo, Shut Up and Move On is the full title, which sounds quite ruthless, but it's not as harsh as it sounds.
Well, and sometimes that's exactly what we got to do in the moment, that we can go back and reflect. Yeah. And I have to share really quick with the Sumo that my daughter and I, we lived in Japan for a while, and we got to see sumo wrestlers.
Oh, wow.
So cool. So fun. Yeah.
That's amazing.
We have pictures with her with sumo wrestlers. So that made me smile when you said that. Yeah. And the author for Sumo, was that Paul McGee?
Paul McGee. So it's McGee. It's a British guy.
Yep. I just, with the accent sometimes different. Like my accent, right? Not yours. And then Carol's book I have heard of before. And love it, especially for children. And it's good for adults too. But
I really like the case studies for her. So I like the stories that, and she's the athletes, and being able, I think it just makes it nice and easy to understand. And just, I think, a lot of us think that we're growth mindset, and we probably are for a lot of things, but it's catching where we have that fixed mindset and being able to challenge that.
Yeah, it's really important, because it's easy. The easy way is the fixed way.
Yes.
The growth is, I say, it's like the easy fixed way is, if something goes wrong, it's just easy to fall down and stay down. And falling down is not the problem, and staying down, right?
Yeah.
And the growth is like deciding to climb. Climbing is work, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, but it's rewarding work, because what happens when you get to the top, you get this beautiful view, right?
Exactly. So. Yeah, very much so. And again, that's the comfort zone, isn't it? It's so much easier to stay where it's comfortable and it's familiar, but all of the exciting stuff is on the other side.
It's risk. Yeah. Okay, well, we have to start wrapping up, which is obviously disappointing. I love what we're talking about. And so knowing that my audience is women who may or may not be in a good place right now. They may be in the situation where you were with your ex, or they may just not have hope in their recovery. Do you have any special words of wisdom for them today?
Somebody who I work with talks a lot, the phrase that he uses, so I'm stealing his branding catchphrase, but he talks about every storm runs out of rain. And I just think, these things do pass. You get stronger, you move through them. And what I think from my point of view and from my experience, even the smallest steps are taking you forward. And I think that from my personal experience was sometimes you feel like you haven't made any movement, but those small steps all add up in getting, you talk about the view at the top of the mountain. You can get there even with the smallest step. One small step each day is still going to get you to the top of the mountain. And I think that it may feel, for people who are listening, it may feel at the moment that your steps are really small and insignificant, but even the smallest step is moving you closer to where you want to get to. And that is really important.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.